You ever notice that the more you chase certain people, the faster they seem to pull away? It can feel personal, almost insulting, like you are somehow losing a battle you never agreed to fight. But the truth is far more powerful than that. What looks like coldness is often protection. What looks like indifference is often fear. And what looks like someone not caring enough may actually be someone terrified of what closeness could demand from them. That is why some people seem to come alive only when the pressure disappears. They do not fall for force. They respond to safety. They do not open up because you corner them. They open up because for the first time they feel they can breathe. And once you understand that, you stop confusing distance with disinterest. You stop mistaking silence for rejection. You stop trying to win love by proving yourself in ways that only make the other person retreat further. Because with avoidant attachment, the real struggle is never about who wants love and who doesn't. It is about who can tolerate vulnerability without feeling trapped by it. It is about who learned early that needing someone could lead to disappointment, embarrassment, or emotional pain. And when that is the lesson the mind stores, every strong feeling later on can feel dangerous. That is why your effort alone is not enough. That is why intensity can backfire. That is why "I care about you" can sometimes sound like pressure to someone whose nervous system hears closeness as a threat. The strange part is that they often do want connection. They may even crave it deeply. But craving and trusting are not the same thing. Desire and safety are not the same thing. And this is where most people make their biggest mistake. They try to force emotional availability out of someone who is built to defend against it. The more you demand, the more they retreat. The more you chase, the more they protect their space. The more you over-explain, the less powerful your presence feels. Because attraction in this dynamic is not created by begging, proving, or collapsing into emotional neediness. It is created when your energy says, "I am here, I am steady, and I do not need to control you to value you." That kind of presence is rare. It is disarming. It does not trigger alarm. It gives the avoidant mind something it rarely expects: peace. And peace is often more seductive than intensity. Here is the part most people never hear clearly enough. Avoidant attachment is not simply a personality quirk. It is a protective strategy. It usually grows when someone learns early in life that emotional needs were inconvenient, ignored, mocked, or met inconsistently. So they adapt. They become self-reliant. They learn to minimize their feelings. They get very good at appearing fine, even when they are not. They may become charming, intelligent, independent, even deeply attractive on the surface. But underneath that strength is often a quiet fear. If I let someone too close, they will see too much, want too much, or take too much from me. So instead of moving toward closeness naturally, they manage it carefully. They regulate distance the way others regulate breathing. And because that behavior can look composed, people misread it all the time. They think the avoidant person is emotionally stable, when in reality the person may be spending a lot of energy keeping their own tenderness locked away. That is why emotional unpredictability shows up. One moment they are warm, attentive, and almost deeply engaged. The next moment they seem detached, busy, or suddenly less reachable. That push-pull pattern can feel intoxicating because it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty activates attention. The brain pays more attention to things it cannot fully predict, but attention is not the same as healthy love. And that is exactly why people get trapped. They think the emotional roller coaster means there is something special here. Sometimes there is chemistry. Sometimes there is unresolved pain. Sometimes there is both. But chemistry alone does not create security. And security is what makes love last. If you do not understand the difference, you will keep interpreting mixed signals as hidden passion when often they are just signs of internal conflict. The avoidant person may feel drawn in by your warmth, then overwhelmed by its consequences. They may like being wanted, but fear what it means to be needed. They may enjoy closeness, but only until it starts to feel like dependency. So if you keep asking, "How do I make them obsessed?" you are asking the wrong question. The healthier question is, how do I become someone whose presence feels safe enough to trust and strong enough to respect? That shift changes your entire posture. It moves you away from manipulation and toward influence. It moves you away from games and toward emotional intelligence. And paradoxically, that is where real magnetism begins. A lot of people hear avoidant and assume the person simply does not care. That is too simple. In many cases, they care a lot. That is exactly why they withdraw. Caring creates exposure, and exposure creates risk. When someone has built their identity around self-protection, any situation that asks for emotional surrender can feel like a threat to control. They may not even consciously think, "I am scared of intimacy." Instead, The body reacts first. The chest tightens. The mind gets restless. They suddenly feel the urge to answer later, think longer, keep options open, or create space. That space is not always about you. Sometimes it is about the internal discomfort of being emotionally seen. The mind says, I'm fine, I just need a little distance. But the nervous system is really saying, this is getting close, and close feels risky. That is why direct confrontation often fails. If you accuse them of being cold, they defend. If you beg for reassurance, they retreat. If you make love feel like a test, they look for the exit. But if you remain composed, they begin to experience a different reality. Closeness does not always lead to chaos. That is the doorway. Not obsession, not domination, not ego games, a new emotional experience. People change most when the emotional pattern they expect is interrupted by something steadier. That is why your tone matters. Your timing matters. Your boundaries matter. When you are calm, you do not feed the avoidant person's fear that intimacy will become suffocating. When you are consistent, you do not feed their fear that closeness is unstable. When you do not chase every withdrawal, you show that your value does not disappear when they get quiet. That is incredibly powerful. It is not a trick. It is psychological reality. Human beings are drawn to what feels emotionally safe and self-respecting. The avoidant mind may resist this at first, but over time, safety can become more attractive than intensity. And that is where the relationship shifts. Not when you force a confession, but when your presence becomes a place where defense is no longer necessary. That is the moment a guarded person starts to soften. Not because you won them over with pressure, but because you removed the pressure. Now let's talk about the mistake that destroys attraction faster than almost anything else. Over-pursuit. When someone with avoidant tendencies senses that your peace depends on them, they often feel trapped. Even if they like you, even if they miss you, even if they are curious about you, the intensity can become a burden. They start to feel responsible for your emotional state, and responsibility kills attraction when it arrives too early. A healthy bond allows two people to choose each other freely. A suffocating bond makes one person feel they must manage the other person's feelings constantly. That is exhausting. So the answer is not to become colder than they are. The answer is to become more grounded than their fear. Be interested without being invasive. Be affectionate without being consuming. Be clear without being controlling. If they need space, give space without punishment. If they return, welcome them without making them pay a tax for having boundaries. That creates trust. And trust is the foundation of real obsession. If by obsession you mean deep emotional preoccupation, not emotional damage. People become deeply attached to those who consistently make them feel both seen and free. Seen means, you notice me. Free means, you do not imprison me. Those two together are rare. That rarity is what makes someone unforgettable. It is also why so many people end up exhausted in avoidant dynamics. They keep trying to win closeness by applying pressure, and pressure makes everything worse. The avoidant person then feels misunderstood. The pursuing person feels abandoned, and both sides become more defensive. The cycle repeats until one person either learns the emotional code or walks away. Learning the code does not mean manipulating someone into attachment. It means understanding what their nervous system interprets as safety versus threat. It means recognizing that tone, timing, and restraint can be more persuasive than emotional intensity. It means knowing that when someone is afraid of being consumed, your ability to remain centered becomes attractive in a way no speech can force. That is why calm confidence is magnetic. It communicates that you are emotionally present but not emotionally dependent. You care, but you do not collapse. You want connection, but you do not erase yourself to get it. That distinction is everything. There is also a deeper layer here that people rarely talk about. Avoidant attachment often creates an internal split between desire and discomfort. On one side, the person may long for closeness, tenderness, loyalty, and being truly known. On the other side, the very thing they long for can trigger fear once it arrives. So they live in contradiction. They approach, then withdraw, they invite, then distance. They may say they want a relationship, but when the relationship asks for vulnerability, the alarm goes off. This can make them appear confusing, inconsistent, even emotionally unavailable in a frustrating way. But underneath, the conflict is often genuine. They're not always playing a game. They may be fighting themselves. And that is why the wrong response is to become bitter or manipulative. The right response is to stay observant. Notice patterns. Notice whether they move closer when you soften your pressure. Notice whether they open up when they feel no threat to their autonomy. Notice whether your own needs are being met, because understanding someone else's attachment style never means abandoning your own standards. In fact, ethical influence requires stronger boundaries, not weaker ones. If someone's pattern is harming you, you do not romanticize it. If they only come close when you withdraw completely, you do not keep shrinking until you disappear. If they feed on uncertainty while refusing real effort, you do not mistake that for depth. Real emotional intelligence includes the ability to say, "I understand why you are like this, and I still require respect." That sentence is powerful because it holds both compassion and self-worth. And when you show self-worth consistently, you become more compelling, not less. Why? Because people are often drawn to what feels grounded. Desperation feels unstable, self-respect feels secure. And secure people tend to attract more honest responses from others. They do not get dragged into the same emotional chaos as easily. They ask better questions. They move slower. They notice red flags earlier. They are less likely to confuse intermittent affection with real commitment. In a world full of mixed signals, that kind of clarity is rare. And rarity creates value. Not because you are playing hard to get, but because you are no longer easy to manipulate. That is a very different thing. If you want to understand why avoidant people sometimes seem obsessed only after distance or disappointment, the answer is complicated but real. Human beings often value what they feel they might lose. When the avoidant person senses that access to you is no longer guaranteed, their attachment system can wake up. Suddenly, the thing they kept at arm's length starts to matter more. Not because you became more available, but because your absence created emotional contrast. But here is the ethical warning. Do not use absence as a weapon. Do not play disappear and return games to manufacture attention. That creates instability, not genuine love. There is a difference between healthy space and calculated withdrawal. Healthy space says, "I respect both of us enough to let this breathe." Calculated withdrawal says, "I am going to manipulate your fear of losing me." One builds trust, the other breaks it. The title of this script may tempt people to believe that hurting someone's ego is the secret to making them love harder. In reality, ego wounds do not create secure attachment. They create tension, obsession, and often confusion. A person may chase what hurt them, but that is not the same as loving them well. It is better to understand the psychology without becoming cruel with it. The most persuasive force in relationships is not pain. It is emotional safety combined with dignity. When someone with avoidant tendencies feels that you are not trying to trap them, shame them, or overwhelm them, they are more likely to reveal their real self. And when a real self appears, the connection becomes human instead of performative. That is what people actually want, even when they do not know how to ask for it. They want to feel seen without being swallowed. They want affection without pressure. They want intimacy without losing identity. If you can offer that, you do not need tricks. Your presence does the work, your boundaries do the work, your calm does the work, and your refusal to play emotional chess becomes the very thing that makes you unforgettable. Think about how this plays out in everyday life. A person with avoidant tendencies may respond better to a message that is warm, short, and unpushy than to a long emotional paragraph demanding reassurance. They may open up more in environments where they feel in control of their pace. They may test whether you respect their independence before they let you closer. They may watch how you handle disappointment because your reaction tells them whether closeness will become chaos. If you panic at every delay, they learn that contact equals pressure. If you remain grounded, they learn that contact can be peaceful. That is why the small things matter so much. Not every breakthrough comes from a big emotional speech. Sometimes it comes from how you respond to a delayed text, how you handle a canceled plan, how you speak when you are disappointed, or how you give space without silently punishing them for needing it. These moments teach the other person what being with you feels like. And for someone guarded by avoidance, feeling safe with another person can be revolutionary. It challenges the old story that closeness always comes with loss. It introduces a new possibility. Maybe connection can exist without danger. Maybe I do not have to run. Maybe I can stay and still be myself. That realization is the turning point. Not because you forced it, but because you made it possible. And when that happens, the relationship stops being a tug of war and starts becoming a place where both people can relax. That is the part many people chase without realizing it. They think they want intensity. What they really want is to be chosen without being suffocated. They want to matter without having to perform. They want to be loved without losing their autonomy. Avoidant attachment is often a defense against exactly the opposite fear, being trapped in need, expectation, or emotional engulfment. When you understand both fears at once, you stop treating the dynamic like a puzzle to solve and start treating it like a human experience to respect. That respect changes how you speak, how you listen, and how you set limits. It also changes how you leave when the situation is unhealthy. Because understanding attachment is not just about staying. Sometimes it is about recognizing that love without reciprocity is just emotional labor. And emotional labor without mutual growth can drain your spirit. So what actually makes an avoidant person drawn in over time? It is often a combination of three things: consistency, calm confidence, and non-needy affection. Consistency means you do not become a different person every time they fluctuate. Calm confidence means their distance does not collapse your identity. Non-needy affection means your care is genuine, but not a demand for immediate reassurance. When those are present, an avoidant person may begin to lower their defenses because the old threat is missing. They may start to feel curious instead of cornered. They may start to miss your steadiness when it is absent. They may realize that your presence does not drain them the way chaos does. That is attractive, deeply attractive. But again, the goal is not to engineer obsession. The goal is to create the conditions where real intimacy can survive. A healthy relationship with an avoidant person is not built on triggering fear, it is built on reducing fear. And the irony is that reducing fear often increases attraction more than any performance ever could. Because the human system responds to relief. It responds to being around someone who does not demand a performance. It responds to safety after stress. It responds to presence without pressure. If you have ever watched someone slowly soften around the right person, you know this is true. They do not soften because they were broken down. They soften because they were not forced to stay armored all the time. That is the deeper psychology here. Avoidant attachment is not defeated by aggression. It is softened by trust. And trust is built through repeated experiences, not dramatic declarations. It is built when someone shows up when they say they will. It is built when conflict does not turn into punishment. It is built when intimacy does not demand surrender of selfhood. That is the kind of love people remember. That is the kind of love that lasts. Anything else may be exciting, but excitement is not the same as devotion. There is a final piece that matters if you want this to stay real and not turn into fantasy. Not every avoidant person is ready to change. Not every connection can be saved by patience. Not every strong feeling is a sign of compatibility. Sometimes what feels intense is just unresolved attachment on both sides. Sometimes the chase becomes addictive because it mirrors old wounds. Sometimes the attraction is fueled more by uncertainty than by genuine fit. So use this knowledge wisely. Let it make you more understanding, not more attached to a harmful dynamic. Let it make you more patient, not more passive. Let it make you more selective, not more available to anyone who withdraws. When you truly understand avoidant attachment, you stop personalizing every act of distance. You stop chasing validation from people who are not able to give it consistently. You stop believing that love must be difficult to be real, and you start valuing the kind of connection that feels calm enough to trust. That is the lesson at the heart of this topic. Not how to break someone's ego, not how to make someone obsessed through pain, but how to become emotionally intelligent enough to recognize fear, respond with dignity, and invite closeness without losing yourself in the process. That is where real power lives. Not in control, in composure, not in pressure, in presence, not in obsession, in the kind of connection that allows both people to breathe. So here is the question that matters most. Do you think people are more likely to fall deeply for the person who chases them or the person who makes them feel safe enough to stay?